Lily pressed her back against the cold cave wall, her infant son cradled in her arms, his feverish body trembling as she rocked him back and forth, her eyes fixed on the entrance. She hadn't slept in 2 days, not since they killed her husband. Not since she grabbed the baby and ran, barefoot and bleeding, into the wilderness with nothing but a torn shawl and a knife too small to protect them. They were coming. She knew it. The men who had stormed her cabin, who had shot Thomas in the chest and left him to bleed out on the floor while they tore the place apart, searching for gold that didn't exist. The men who had sworn they'd find her and take what was rightfully theirs, even if it meant burning her alive. The baby whimpered, his tiny fists clenching as another wave of fever racked his little body. "Shh," Lily whispered, pressing a trembling kiss to his damp forehead. "Please, baby, please." Her ears strained for any sound. Hoofbeats, voices, the snap of a branch. But the world outside the cave was a void. An abyss of silence that felt like the calm before the storm. Lily swallowed, her throat raw, her heart pounding. If they found her now, it was over. If they found her, they would take her back to the cabin, to the room where Thomas's blood still stained the floorboards. They would strip her of everything she had left, and if she fought back, they would take her baby too. A single tear traced down her cheek, but she bit down on her lip to stop herself from sobbing. Crying would get her caught. Crying would get them both killed. She squeezed her eyes shut, clutching the baby closer, praying for a miracle, praying for the nightmare to end, praying for someone, anyone, to save them. Lily's body jolted as a shadow fell across the cave entrance, blocking out what little light remained. Her breath caught in her throat, her fingers tightening around the handle of the knife she'd stolen from the cabin. The baby whimpered, his feverish cheeks flushed, and she pressed a trembling hand over his mouth, praying he wouldn't cry. A figure stepped inside, a tall, broad-shouldered man wrapped in a heavy woolen cloak, his face hidden beneath the brim of a wide hat. He didn't speak, didn't move, just stood there, his eyes scanning the darkness, his gaze cold and unyielding. Lily's heart hammered in her chest, her muscles coiled tight, ready to strike. If he was one of them, if he'd come to finish what they started, she would fight. She would stab him, bite him, claw his eyes out, anything to keep her baby safe. The man stepped forward, his boots scraping against the cave floor, the sound echoing like a death knell in Lily's ears. She gritted her teeth, the knife shaking in her hand, her pulse roaring like a river. "I know you're in here," the man said, his voice low and deep, a gravelly murmur that slid through the cave like a knife. "You're not safe." Lily's jaw clenched, her mind racing. Was it a trick? A trap? Was he luring her out so the others could grab her, drag her back to the cabin, take her baby and leave her bleeding on the floor beside her husband's body? "Leave," she said, her voice hard and unsteady, the knife trembling in her grip. "I don't have anything you want." The man stopped, his head tilting to one side as if considering her words. "I'm not here to hurt you," he said. "But they are." Lily swallowed, her throat dry, her breath catching as he lifted his head, and for the first time, she saw his face, a hard jaw covered in dark stubble, sharp cheekbones, eyes dark as coal. A warrior's face. The kind of man who could snap her in half with a single blow. "Who are you?" she whispered, her fingers clenched around the knife. The man's gaze softened, just a fraction, as he lowered his voice. "The man who's going to keep you alive." Lily's eyes stayed locked on the man as he stepped closer, his gaze flicking to the baby cradled in her arms. "You need to move," he said, his voice steady but urgent. "They're coming." Lily's grip tightened on the knife, her mind spinning. Could she trust him? He was strong, taller than any man she'd ever seen, his shoulders broad beneath the heavy cloak, his jaw set with a grim determination. But he was still a stranger, a man who could be working for them, a man who could be luring her out just to hand her over to the men who killed her husband. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice firm despite the tremor in her hands. The man's jaw clenched, his eyes darkening as he glanced back toward the cave entrance. "I was a scout for the Lakota," he said. Now I'm nobody. Lily swallowed, her heart pounding. A Lakota scout, a warrior. But why was he here? Why was he helping her? You don't look like nobody, she said, her voice sharper than she intended. The man's expression didn't change. I was passing through when I heard the gunshots. Saw them dragging a body out of a cabin. Saw them leave a trail of blood. Lily's chest tightened, the memory of Thomas lying on the floor, his eyes wide and unseeing, flashing through her mind. They killed my husband, she whispered, her voice breaking. They took everything. They're still looking for me. The man's jaw twitched, his fists clenching at his sides. How many? He asked. 3, Lily said. Maybe 4. The man nodded, his eyes narrowing as he turned toward the entrance. They're closing in. We need to go, now! Lily's legs trembled as she rose to her feet, the baby whimpering in her arms, his tiny fists clenching and unclenching. Where? She asked, her breath coming in sharp, shallow bursts. Where do we go? The man moved to the entrance, his body tense, eyes scanning the darkness. There's a place up the ridge, he said. An old mining shack. They won't think to look there. Lily's throat tightened, her gaze darting to the knife in her hand. The only weapon she had. The only thing standing between her and death. Why are you helping me? She asked, her voice trembling. The man's dark eyes met hers, a storm raging behind them. Because they took my family too. Lily's legs shook as she followed the warrior up the steep, rocky incline, each step a battle against the biting wind and the ache in her bones. The baby's fevered whimpers echoed in her ears, a haunting reminder of how close to death they both were. The warrior moved like a shadow, his broad back a solid wall of muscle and silence as he led the way, his eyes darting from side to side, always scanning, always listening. What's your name? Lily asked, her voice tight and breathless. The warrior didn't look back. Chayton. The name hung heavy in the air, and Lily pressed the baby closer to her chest, her pulse pounding like a drum. Why did they kill your family? She asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Chayton's jaw clenched, a muscle twitching beneath the dark stubble on his face. Same reason they killed your husband, he said, his voice hard. They wanted the land, they wanted control. Lily swallowed, the memory of Thomas lying in a pool of his own blood slamming into her like a fist. And you? She asked, her gaze fixed on Chayton's broad shoulders. What did they want from you? Chayton stopped, his dark eyes narrowing as he scanned the trees, the shadows thick and heavy in the distance. They wanted me to disappear, he said. And now, they'll want you to do the same. Lily's breath hitched, the baby shifting restlessly in her arms. What do you mean? Chayton turned to face her, his jaw set, eyes as hard as stone. If they don't find you, they'll burn your cabin. They'll tell the town you ran off, that you abandoned your husband and child. They'll take the land, and no one will question it. Lily's stomach twisted, the truth sinking in like a knife. And if they do find me? Chayton stepped closer, his presence a solid wall of heat and power. They won't let you live. The baby whimpered, his tiny fists clenching, and Lily's eyes filled with tears. I don't know what to do, she whispered, her voice breaking. I can't run forever. I can't fight them. Chayton's gaze softened, just a fraction, his rough hand lifting to brush a strand of hair from her face. You don't have to fight alone, he said, his voice low and steady. Not anymore. Lily's throat tightened, the warmth of his touch like a lifeline in the cold, dark night. Why are you helping me? She asked, her eyes searching his. Chayton's jaw clenched, his gaze hardening. Because they took my wife and daughter too, he said, his voice a raw, ragged whisper. And if I can't save them, maybe I can save you. Lily's breath came in ragged gasps as she stumbled up the ridge, her legs shaking beneath her, the baby's feverish weight growing heavier with every step. Chayton moved ahead, his broad back a shield against the darkness, his gaze fixed forward, every muscle in his body coiled tight like a predator ready to strike. The old mining shack loomed ahead, its wooden frame leaning like a man on his last legs. the door hanging crooked on rusted hinges. Chayton pushed it open, the wood groaning beneath his hand, and nodded for Lily to step inside. "Sit," he said, his voice low, commanding. Lily sank onto the floor, her back pressed against the splintered wall as she cradled the baby, her arms shaking. "Is it safe here?" she asked, her voice a rasp. Chayton scanned the small room, his dark eyes sweeping over the broken table, the rickety chair, the piles of old rags littering the floor. "For now," he said, his jaw tight. "But they'll keep searching. They won't stop until they find you." Lily's throat tightened, her mind spinning. "What do they want?" Chayton knelt beside her, his face hard, eyes shadowed. "They want to erase you. If they kill you, they can claim the land. No witnesses, no one to stand in their way." The baby whimpered, his tiny fists clenching as he shivered in her arms, and Lily pressed her lips to his burning forehead, her heart breaking. "I can't let them take him," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't let them hurt my baby." Chayton's jaw clenched, a muscle ticking beneath his stubble. "They won't," he said, his voice fierce. "Not while I'm here." Lily's eyes searched his, desperation clawing at her insides. "Why?" she whispered. "Why are you helping me?" Chayton's gaze dropped to the floor, his fists clenching at his sides. "My wife was pregnant when they came," he said, his voice hollow. "They dragged her from our home, said they'd let her live if I gave them what they wanted." Lily swallowed, her chest tightening. What did they want? Chayton's eyes darkened, his jaw tightening. "Me," he said. "They wanted me dead, said the only good Lakota is a dead one." Lily's breath caught in her throat, her mind spinning. "And your wife?" Chayton's gaze dropped, his fists trembling. "They shot her in the back, left her in the dirt. I found her too late." Lily's eyes burned with tears, her heart aching for this man, this warrior who had lost everything. "I'm so sorry," she whispered, her voice breaking. Chayton's jaw clenched, his eyes blazing. "Don't be," he said, "because they're still out there, and they think they can do the same to you." Lily swallowed, the fear coursing through her like a river of ice. "What do we do now?" Chayton's dark eyes met hers, a storm raging in their depths. "We make them pay." Lily sat on the cold floor of the shack, her back pressed against the splintered wall, her baby nestled in her arms. Chayton paced the small room like a caged animal, his jaw clenched, his dark eyes flashing with a fury that simmered just beneath the surface. "They'll come this way," he said, his voice low and hard. "They'll search every inch of this ridge until they find you." Lily swallowed, her throat dry, her heart pounding in her chest. "Then what?" Chayton stopped, his fists clenched at his sides. "Then they'll kill you. Take the baby. Burn this place to the ground." Lily's breath caught, her arms tightening around the baby's tiny, feverish body. "We have to leave," she said, her voice trembling. "We have to run." Chayton shook his head, his jaw set. "They'll expect that. They know the terrain. They know how to track. Running will get you killed." Lily's eyes burned, her vision blurring as tears threatened to spill. "Then what do we do?" Chayton crouched in front of her, his hands braced on his knees, his gaze intense. "We fight," he said, his voice fierce. "But we do it smart. We don't fight them head on. We don't give them what they want." Lily's stomach twisted, her mind spinning. "I don't know how to fight," she said, her voice breaking. "I don't know how to do any of this." Chayton's gaze softened, a flicker of something like sadness passing through his eyes. "You're stronger than you think," he said. "And right now, you're all your son has." Lily swallowed, her throat tight, her pulse pounding in her ears. "What do you need me to do?" Chayton straightened, his jaw set, his eyes hardening. "You stay here," he said. "Keep the baby quiet. Don't move until I come back." Lily's eyes widened, her heart seizing. "Where are you going?" Chayton pulled a knife from his belt, the blade glinting in the dim light. "To set a trap," he said. "And when they walk into it, I'll be waiting." Lily's chest tightened, a knot of fear and desperation twisting in her gut. "You're going to fight them alone?" Chayton's jaw clenched, his gaze darkening. "I've been fighting them alone for a long time. he said, his voice a low, ragged whisper. And this time, they won't walk away. Lily opened her mouth to speak, to beg him to stay, but he was already moving toward the door, his broad back a wall of muscle and steel, his shoulders rigid, his fists clenched. "Chayton," she called, her voice breaking. He paused, his hand resting on the doorframe, his jaw tight. "What? Be careful," she said, her voice trembling. Chayton's eyes met hers, a storm raging in their depths. "They took my wife," he said, his voice hard. "They took my daughter. They won't take you." And then he was gone, disappearing into the night like a ghost, leaving Lily alone in the dark with nothing but her baby's fevered breaths and the fear clawing at her throat. Lily crouched in the corner of the shack, her knees drawn to her chest, the baby's feverish body clutched against her as the hours dragged by like a slow, torturous march. Every creak of the wood, every gust of wind sent her pulse racing, her eyes darting to the door, expecting it to fly open and the men to storm inside. Chayton had been gone too long. Too long. What if they found him? What if they killed him? What if they were already on their way, armed with guns and knives, ready to finish what they started? Lily's breath came in shallow gasps, her heart a frantic drumbeat in her chest. The baby whimpered, his tiny fists clenching as another wave of fever racked his body. "Shh, baby," Lily whispered, rocking him back and forth, her voice trembling. "Mama's here. Mama's got you." But what did she really have? Nothing. A sick child, a torn dress, a knife she barely knew how to hold, and a man who had already lost everything, out there alone, trying to protect a woman and a baby who weren't even his. Lily pressed a hand to her mouth, tears burning her eyes. "Chayton?" she whispered, the name slipping out like a prayer. And then, outside, a sound, a thud, then another. Footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, closing in on the shack. Lily's spine went rigid, her blood turning to ice. She strained her ears, her muscles tensed, ready to spring, to fight, to do whatever she had to do to keep her baby alive. The door swung open, slamming against the wall, and there he was, Chayton. Blood smeared across his cheek, his shirt torn, his chest rising and falling with labored breaths. "Get up," he said, his voice rough and urgent. "We have to go, now!" Lily scrambled to her feet, clutching the baby to her chest, her heart slamming against her ribs. "What happened?" she asked, her voice shaking. Chayton's jaw clenched, his dark eyes wild and fierce. "They're close," he said. "Too close." Lily's stomach twisted, her knees trembling. "Did they see you?" Chayton shook his head, his fists clenched at his sides. "I set the trap," he said, "but it won't hold them for long. We have to keep moving." Lily's eyes darted to the baby, to Chayton's blood-streaked face, to the dark woods outside. "Where are we going?" Chayton's gaze met hers, dark and unyielding. "Somewhere they'll never look," he said, his voice hard as stone. "And when they do find us, we'll be ready." Chayton led Lily through the dense woods, his hand a firm grip around her wrist as they pushed through the underbrush, the baby cradled against her chest. The air was thick with the scent of pine and damp earth, the silence broken only by the crunch of their boots against fallen leaves and the distant echo of voices, voices that were closing in. "Where are we going?" Lily whispered, her breath ragged, her legs burning from the climb. "There's a ravine up ahead," Chayton said, his jaw tight, his eyes scanning the shadows. "A cave hidden in the rock. It's where I hid after they killed my family." Lily's stomach twisted, her grip tightening around her baby. "Are we going to be safe there?" Chayton didn't answer. Instead, he yanked her down behind a fallen tree, his hand covering her mouth, his breath hot against her ear. "Quiet," he whispered. Lily's heart pounded, her pulse a deafening roar in her ears. Across the clearing, 3 men trudged through the woods, rifles slung over their shoulders, their eyes scanning the trees. The leader, a burly man with a scar running down the side of his face, stopped and sniffed the air, his gaze hard and calculating. "They're close," he said, his voice rough, his boots crushing twigs beneath his feet. "The squaw and her brat can't be far." Lily's breath caught in her throat, a sob clawing its way up her chest. Chayton's hand pressed harder against her mouth. His jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed. The men moved on, their footsteps fading into the distance, and Chayton released her, his hand falling away as he exhaled a slow, shuddering breath. "You okay?" he asked, his eyes searching hers. Lily nodded, though her entire body shook, her arms trembling as she held her baby tighter. "What now?" she whispered, her voice a fragile thread. Chayton's jaw set, his eyes darkening. "Now we make them think we're somewhere we're not," he said, his tone hard as stone. "And when they come for us, we'll be waiting." He pushed to his feet, grabbing a branch from the ground and scrawling deep grooves in the dirt. Tracks that led in the opposite direction, tracks that would lead the men away from the cave. "They killed your family," Lily said, her voice small, her heart heavy. "Did you ever find out who?" Chayton's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with a rage that sent a chill down her spine. "I know exactly who," he said, his voice a low, lethal rasp. "The same men who killed your husband, the same men hunting you now." Lily swallowed, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her chest. "Rafe and his men," she said, her breath catching. Chayton's gaze bore into hers, his fists clenched. "And they're going to pay," he said, his voice deadly calm. "All of them." Lily's legs burned as she climbed the rocky slope, the baby whimpering in her arms, his tiny fists clenching as another wave of fever shook his fragile body. Chayton moved ahead, his broad shoulders tense, his eyes scanning every shadow, every rustle of the leaves, every whisper of the wind. The cave loomed ahead, a jagged mouth carved into the rock, hidden behind a curtain of hanging vines and tangled brush. Chayton pushed the foliage aside and ushered Lily inside, his jaw clenched, his breaths coming fast. "Stay low," he said, his voice low and urgent. "They'll be here soon." Lily crouched against the cool stone wall, her back pressed against the cave's rough surface, the baby's fevered skin hot against her chest. "What's the plan?" she whispered, her eyes fixed on Chayton as he rummaged through a pile of old blankets and weathered bags. "They think we're running," Chayton said, pulling out a battered rifle, his jaw set. "We let them think that. When they follow the tracks I laid, we circle back and take them from behind." Lily's stomach twisted, her eyes dropping to the rifle in Chayton's hands. "You're going to kill them?" Chayton's jaw clenched, his dark eyes hard as stone. "If I have to." Lily swallowed, her throat tight, her heart pounding. "But what if they kill you first?" Chayton paused, his gaze meeting hers, a storm raging behind his eyes. "Then you take this," he said, holding the rifle out to her, his jaw tight. "And you fight." Lily shook her head, her hands trembling. "I can't." "Yes, you can," Chayton said, his voice hard. "They killed your husband. They'll kill your baby. They'll kill you. You can't be afraid to fight back." Lily's eyes burned, her chest tight, memories of Thomas lying on the cabin floor, blood pooling around his body, flashing through her mind. "What about you?" she asked, her voice breaking. "What happens to you?" Chayton's gaze darkened, his jaw tightening. "I don't matter," he said, his voice low. "Not anymore." Lily's breath caught, her pulse a frantic drumbeat in her chest. "You matter to me," she whispered, the words slipping out before she could stop them. Chayton's jaw clenched, his eyes dropping to the ground, his fists tightening around the rifle. "I can't lose you too," Lily said, her voice breaking. "I can't lose anyone else." Chayton exhaled a slow, shuddering breath, his shoulders sagging. "You won't," he said, his voice rough. "Not today." And then he moved to the cave entrance, his body a solid wall of muscle and silence, his dark eyes scanning the trees as the sound of hoofbeats echoed in the distance, growing louder, closer. "They're here," he said, his voice a low, lethal rasp. "Stay down, stay quiet, and whatever happens, don't come out." Lily pressed her back against the cold cave wall, her baby clutched against her chest as Chayton stepped outside, the rifle gripped tight in his hands. The air was thick with tension, the hoofbeats growing louder, closer, until the ground seemed to shake beneath them. Lily's breath came in sharp, shallow gasps, her eyes locked on the cave entrance, her heart pounding like a war drum. Outside, voices echoed through the trees, gruff, taunting, filled with cruel laughter. "Come out, Lily!" one of them shouted, his voice a raspy drawl. "We know you're up here, and that Injun with you. Bring him out too. Maybe we'll be kind and kill you quick." Lily's stomach twisted, bile rising in her throat. They were here, the men who killed Thomas, the men who would kill her too. Chayton's shadow moved in the mouth of the cave, his broad shoulders tense, his jaw clenched, his eyes narrowed into deadly slits. He raised the rifle, sighting down the barrel, his breaths coming slow and steady. "Where's the girl?" another voice called, closer now. "I want my money's worth. Maybe I'll take her for a ride before we put her in the ground." Chayton's jaw clenched, his eyes flashing with a fury that burned like fire. "Keep talking," he muttered under his breath. "Keep coming." The first man stepped into view, his dirty coat flapping in the wind, a rifle slung over his shoulder, a wicked grin stretching his chapped lips. "Come out, little Lily," he sneered. "Your husband begged for his life, you know. Cried like a baby. What do you think your little one will do?" Chayton's finger tightened on the trigger, his jaw clenching so hard his teeth ached. Another man emerged, this one scarred and hulking, a revolver gripped in his meaty fist. "Come on, girl," he shouted. "You think you can hide forever? We know this ridge better than you do." Chayton's gaze flicked to the third man, the one with the scar slicing down his face, the man who had shot Thomas, the man who had led the raid. "Rafe," Chayton whispered, his voice dripping with venom. "This is for them." The rifle cracked, the sound echoing through the trees like a thunderclap. Rafe's head snapped back, his body crumpling to the ground, blood pooling beneath him. The other two men shouted, guns raised, bullets slicing through the air as Chayton dropped to the ground, rolling behind a boulder, reloading with practiced speed. "Get him," one of them roared. "He's just one man." But Chayton wasn't just one man. He was a warrior, a husband, a father, a man with nothing left to lose. Another shot rang out, and the second man fell, his gun slipping from his grasp as he dropped to his knees, a hole between his eyes. The third man charged, his face twisted in rage, his boots thundering against the ground. Chayton stood, his eyes cold, his jaw clenched, the rifle aimed dead center. The man stopped, his chest heaving, his eyes wide and wild. "Please," he gasped, his hands shaking. "Don't." The rifle cracked again, the echo lingering in the air long after the man hit the ground. Silence fell over the ridge, the only sound the rustle of wind through the trees and the rapid, heavy breathing that echoed in Chayton's ears. He lowered the rifle, his hands shaking, his jaw clenched as he stared down at the bodies of the men who had taken everything from him. "It's over," he whispered, his voice breaking. Inside the cave, Lily crouched in the darkness, her baby pressed against her chest, tears streaming down her face as she listened to the silence that meant Chayton was still alive. "Chayton," she whispered, her voice trembling, her heart pounding as she rose to her feet, her legs shaking as she stepped toward the light.